Let's talk supply chain. So welcome to the show, Dwayne.
Hey, Sarah, thanks for having me.
I am so excited to have you here. I mean, I feel like we're just getting the chance to go back to my own roots today because you're a Canadian 3PL, which is where I started, and a piece of my heart really is still there. And you have such a great ethos. You're all about adding value, creating competitive advantage, building, great cultures. It's music to my ears. So I'm looking forward to shining a spotlight on SCI today. And also, Dwayne, you and I have been connected for several years, and I've been wanting to get you on the show for a long time. So today is the day, and I'd love to just dive right in. So, why don't you give us an introduction before we dive a little bit deeper into one of the topics that are kind of the hot topics in transportation today? So, what do you do? How do you help your customers?
Yeah, so at SCI we help scalable customers build a model where we help them scale. So growth customers that are looking to achieve sustainable growth year over year. When we started this journey, it was just build to the warehouse and just be a domestic player. But since then, and we'll talk more as we built a model where we've allowed our customers to hold freight in Canada and utilize different trade agreements across the world in a borderless commerce.
That's awesome. I can't wait to talk about borderless e-commerce because honestly, I think it should have been done a long time ago. And there's so many different ways that we can do this. And it opens up so many great opportunities, not only for retailers, but also consumers like me who want to buy from American brands. And sometimes it's just way too difficult.
Agreed, right? If you think about, we all buy something and we just want it delivered to our front door. However, we all don't want to have pay for shipping, pay for duties, pay for taxes. So understanding those trade agreements, understanding the way to get product to consumers in a cost-effective way. And the other piece is that everybody's competing for a different customer and everybody's competing for customers. So building a model where not only is the shipping sustainable, but also the cost to buy anything is sustainable because at the end of the day, there's so much competition to get a consumer. And so we just want stuff delivered. And at SCI, we've built a model where we have taken our knowledge and our foundation of 20 years in ecom, and we built that now to give our customers more than just a domestic Canada solution.
Well, and actually, I wanted to say that about you because you have 25 years of experience in sales and leadership. And you are currently the Senior Director of Retail E-commerce Strategy and Section 321, which we're going to be talking about today at SCI. And so you come with a lot of knowledge. You've been in the business a long time. And it's super exciting to see how SCI has grown in the market and really put the retailers forefront as to how you can help them. So let's dive into that a little bit deeper. Who are your customers? Like if I'm sitting here and I love what I'm hearing, who am I to be a customer for you? Are there sectors that you focus on? So break down the types of clients you work with. Maybe it's size, for example, sectors. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, so we typically have six verticals we'll go after, the traditional ones that most 3PLs will go after, the apparels, the footwear. Yeah, we might go after outdoor goods. We could go after some flat pack furniture, but we're really looking for retailers who aren't flat growth. We want the retailers that, some retailers we do work for have been around for 6, 7 years and they're on a trajectory growing 25, 30%. Other customers might want to expand into the US. Other customers might be in the US and Canada and they want to expand into the UK. So our foundation becomes six verticals, but our conversation with our customers. Okay, listen, what else do you want to do? Because if it's just shipping into Canada, we only have last time I checked, 38 million people. But do you want to unlock the US? Do you want to unlock the UK? So our customers could be different verticals, but the other thing is, what do you want to do in the future? Because just providing today's solution typically won't last. And we've seen that with lots of brands and retailers and we don't need to name the names of those retailers who have struggled, but there's a number of them out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've spoken to a number of retailers that are in the US currently that haven't thought about expanding to Canada, or maybe they have and they're just not sure as to what that looks like or what that could look like to them. And you don't necessarily need bricks and mortar in Canada to be able to do that. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more today. And so the logistics industry really has changed a lot, but you've kept up. Like you said, you've changed along with it, which is tough because logistics isn't necessarily known for its love of change. You and I have been in this industry for a long time, and I can definitely, that is definitely true. So why is embracing change in this industry so important? Why are we so resistant sometimes?
Here's what I would say. I think the ability to go borderless has changed. Embracing change, right? So I think there is some folks, and no differently in the real world, right? Some people they don't like change. Some people they do like change. So I think it's we as consumers are driving the change because our ability to want something is focused and affecting the change in supply chain. So if you think about it, whoever would have thought it would take a couple of days to get something from Asia? Whoever would have thought your running shoes would be delivered from the UK? Whoever thought something would come from Canada, Australia? So supply chain is changing every day, and I think that ability to change we've seen with some retailers, as to your point, U.S. retailers or brands they want to come to Canada. They unlock that by looking at a different way to do their distribution, possibly putting their DC in the US into Canada. They unlock an international market. They call it international when they come to Canada. And it's a plane ride. And it's not a very long plane ride, but they call that unlocking international. So it gives them the ability to test the waters outside of the US border. So supply chain is changing. We as consumers, the way we buy things is changing, and no longer are things constant. I think every day supply chain, I just heard last week that container prices have now gone up for some reason because there's a rumor that something's happening. And it's like, well, that was COVID when that was happening. So it's changes everywhere in supply chain.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually made the mistake at the Atlanta airport of going out the domestic way instead of the international way because I wasn't thinking that I came from an international flight.
Yeah.
Anyways, if you are ever at the Atlanta airport, do not make that mistake because you have to take a shuttle bus back to the international side of the airport, and it was
And
it
the
was a
tram,
very long
the
car
tram.
ride. I totally missed it. But I think part of what you're talking about in that change is that we've got to change a little bit of our mindset, right? Because with change comes huge opportunity. And so for us to be resistant to it, especially now, after all the change that we've been through in the last couple of years, we definitely should really be embracing it because there's tons of opportunity. But let's dive a little bit deeper into some of that change because I want to talk about the landscape of logistics from the rise of Amazon and the increasing customer demand that followed, which you just mentioned, to rapidly evolving technology and even sustainability concerns. The industry really is a constant set of moving goalposts. So, where is the industry right now? What do you see in 2024 as sort of the main challenges, opportunities for logistics and supply chain?
Yeah, I think, we wouldn't be talking supply chain if we didn't bring up Amazon, right? They have changed the way we as consumers think. My kids, they just know Amazon Prime. So my point is, I think this year, I think although we believe we need something right away, I think the mindset has shifted a bit. Do I really need this delivered today, or can it wait till tomorrow or the next day? I think the other thing that I'm seeing is brands and retailers from an e-com perspective they're starting to now dial back the delivery times or possibly charge a little more for some of the delivery times. So I think the opportunities that we're seeing in the market is some brands, I said it before, some brands are willing to look at change and others kind of like, well, no, we're just going to wait it out. And I think that's the divide we're seeing with a lot of our customers and the ones we're talking to. And I go back to the models that we're building. It's yes, we'll take the risk on something, or others will just stay stagnant. But the opportunity, I think, is really the mind shift of the consumer is starting to shift on do they really need stuff right away?
Yeah, it's true. I was actually talking about, do you remember the Domino's 30 minutes or it's free
Yep.
delivery?
Yep.
I talked about this on Thoughts and Coffee a few weeks ago, and it was actually the story behind, that 30 minutes or free and what transpired after they launched that and what it looked like to consumers and drivers and the company. And they ended up dialing that back because it just ended up being so much chaos and
Yep.
really didn't do anybody any good. And so I use that as an analogy because sometimes we really want something, but we don't know what it costs us as consumers, what it costs companies, people's mental health,
Yep.
sustainability, right? Climate change and emissions and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And you're right. I think, we want to be armed with delivery options. We want to be armed with what are my options, and I can choose whether I want it same day, 2 days, a week from now, because maybe I just don't need it right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think the other thing is, one of the things we from an SCI perspective is our sustainability plan and what we've built, and we've actually taken that to heart with some of the unique solutions we've built for some of our customers, right down to technology that allows us to build a box on demand solution where we actually can put more cartons in a transport truck. So, which means, hey, it could be, maybe it's one less tractor trailer a day. Well,
Right.
that one less tractor trailer over 52 weeks, it all adds up to emissions, right? So I think not only are us as consumers looking for that sustainable practice, I think from a 3PL perspective and a transportation provider, we too now are going back to our customers to talk about it. And some of our customers, challenge us on the plan because they want to be working with a partner that has that plan. Because
Hmm.
let's face it, I live in northern Toronto and I used my snowblower twice last year.
Right.
And 7, 8 years ago, I used that snowblower 10 times.
Yeah.
So the world is changing, unfortunately, and we think that some of the things we're doing are going to provide impact to the environment.
I love that. Well, let's talk about what you mentioned earlier, which is the rise of borderless e-commerce.
Yep.
Talk to us about this. How has this affected the retailers? What does that look like?
Yeah. So 5 years ago, I mean, SCI has been in the e-com space for 20 plus years. Big Bad Amazon was our first customer. But 5 years ago, we looked at the model and we said, we can only get so much business out of the Canadian
Market.
market. So we started to think about what else we could do. And from my past employer, Pitney Bowes, they had a product called Border Free, which was a cross border tool. So I started to learn a little more. And as COVID hit, the rise of e-com continued. And so we as consumers continued to buy stuff and we want it delivered. So we started to figure out different things like trade agreements and what impact trade agreements had. And we're not a customs broker. That's not what we're doing. We have third party partners that deal with all that. But we started to understand that. Then we started to go to our customers and have conversations. And it's interesting the impact you give from talking to a customer about being able to avoid something like duties. And
Mhm.
it's tangible dollars. And that tangible dollars, as well as unlocking different markets around the world, it really started to resonate and not resonate with, it really resonated with owners, CEOs, people like, at the top level. And so not only were we understanding what consumers wanted to do, the market, that's when COVID was going and containers were $20,000 and it was a competition for customers and all these things were going on. And we started to have this little unicorn that kind of said, hey, would you like to talk about this? And so borderless communications and commerce was rising. Our storyboard had changed, and then all of a sudden this explosion happened, and it started to go very well for us. So we kind of hit at the right time. That's what I
Mhm.
would say.
Well, and it's interesting, right? I think when we think about Canada and the US, like you said, a lot of people are like, it's international, but we're really next door to each other. And so,
Right.
how do we utilize the agreements? How do we work better together? And with the rise of e-commerce and what consumers are looking for on both sides of the border, it
Right.
really doesn't, it seems like it needs to be something that is a lot easier than it has been.
Right. Right.
And so when I did the research for this, you say that a well-designed supply chain can be your competitive advantage. And I totally agree with this. I've talked about this a lot on the show.
Right.
But I think that businesses have only really started to appreciate that in the last few years that their supply chain can really help them with that. What do you think are the main factors that have influenced that step change? And talk to us about that competitive advantage. Like, what impact can it have? How have you at SCI helped with that? And I think that there's a program here that we want to mention and talk about that's really going to drive that borderless e-commerce.
Yeah. So I think there's, if we just step back for 1 second, so Canada, US, and Mexico, right? So Mexico is part of the three country trade, right? And I think how does it have impact on brands and how are we building a competitive? I don't want to give all the secret sauce out,
Right.
but I think our competitive advantage in this was and I said before, we understood what the agreements were with different countries around the world. And then we came to brands with an idea. Number one was there was a tactical cost removal from Section 321. Absolutely. And once again, we're not brokers. We just facilitate a
Hmm.
distribution model and we have partners that come in. Secondly, we were unlocking an international market. So we're testing the market in Canada and the brands we have seen have built a model where now they're unlocking UK, Australia, as I said before. And the third thing was why we think our model is very well designed is our heritage of ecom. We grew up from Amazon. We had other large retailers like Walmart in our business, and a lot of those people at SC are still here. So they understand how to scale. They understand how to follow a very quick moving ecom provider. So not only did we hit it at the right time, but we also came to brands with tactical cost execution, which every retailer and every brand today needs. And then we figured out how to build an international platform for them. And then the last piece is we took our heritage and what we were built on, and we plugged that in. So when a retailer in the US comes to us and says, hey, we're doing 4,000 shipments a day, we just go, yeah, okay, we get it. We're okay. Because the first thought sometimes is, how can this little Canadian 3PL handle our volume? But very quickly they figure out that, we can handle it.
Well, you can not only handle it, but you can also scale with them,
Right, right.
which
And
is
we've
what they
seen
want
that.
to know.
Yeah, I mean, Black Friday is a great example. We've had customers, that will go from 5,000 shipments to 30, 40, 50,000 shipments a day. And so giving us the ability to not only have a workforce to handle it, I talked a little bit about that automation piece and as well have the technology behind it to give our customers confidence, with tools that we use like a BI platform. It gives our customers, confidence if they're sitting in Los Angeles.
Hmm.
Some of our customers they just watch the BI portal at Black Friday from Los Angeles. They don't fly people up here because they're comfortable and confident we can handle it.
Right. Absolutely. And that's the whole thing around e-commerce, right? It's really hard to predict and forecast,
Right.
really, for the long term. And even with all of these changes that are happening, it's not easy to be able to forecast even past 6 months from now. I mean, take the pandemic, for example, that just threw things into a tizzy. And we
Yeah.
kind of haven't gotten back to this like normal. And I don't know if we're going to get to a normal. And so with e-commerce and being a retailer, you want to know that your customers are taken care of, but you also want to know you as a customer is taken care of as well when your orders fluctuate.
Yeah.
And that you're not going to say to them, one day you're at 4,000, the next you're at 10, and that goes for a couple of weeks and you're back down to 4, that you're going to say, no, thanks, we don't want the business anymore, right?
Yeah. Well, exactly. Yeah.
um,
Right.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think as long as we get the proper data, I think it's up to us to figure it out. And 99.9% of our customers, in our operating teams, they all, work with our customers to make sure they have the proper forecasts.
Yeah.
And then it's up to us to act on what they give us.
Absolutely. Now, you've mentioned international expansion, but you've also mentioned sort of that localization piece. Can you break that down for us a little bit more and tell us about how you're able to help with that international expansion? I mean, you've mentioned Canada, obviously. I kind of think
Yeah.
that as local, but Like
Yeah.
you mentioned the UK, you've mentioned Australia, and a lot of retailers, they're doing well in the US, but they want to expand. And again, they look at it and they're like, this is really hard. I don't know if we want to touch
Yeah.
it. And then they call SCI and they're like, oh, it's that easy? Okay. So talk to us
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah. So, if you think about some customers that, they might have a distribution facility in Toronto, maybe they service the US and Canada. So typically, with tools like Shopify, et cetera, they can unlock, UK, Australia, et cetera. And to us, to be honest, when it comes through, I'm not going to get into the WMS technology, but when it comes through the order system, we'll say our operators and our folks running the DCs, they're just putting, product into boxes or into envelopes, and they're putting just a different shipping label on it. And they're putting, in a different Gaylord at the loading dock, and then another carrier picks it up. Because the interesting thing about the whole model now is the product it can be in Toronto today, and it can be in Australia in 2 days.
Mhm.
So it's all on the front end on a lot of our retailers, and there's lots of OMSs out there that can handle that. We're really just getting an order, putting it in a box, and we're putting a shipping label on it, and somebody's picking up. No differently than our domestic Canada or US orders are. So there's no real difference to us. The back end is really facilitated by our customers. So we just tell customers, just turn it on. Like we've told
Just
many
turn it
customers,
on.
just turn it on, see what happens, right? Like we had one customer, quick story, we had one customer and they were just a Canadian-based customer. They were happy with Canada, and I said to one of the owners, I said, just turn it on.
See what
And he goes,
happens.
well, I don't know, I'm scared. I go, just turn it on. And he says, okay. So then he called me 3 days later. He goes, we got 36 orders from the United States. I go, oh. He goes, we're going to put a little bit of marketing to it. 2 weeks later, he called back. He said, we got 100 orders. I said, well, I told you, just turn it on.
Just turn
So
it
it
on. I
works,
love
right?
that. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I love that. I love that. All right. So you just gave us one example, but can you share maybe a bit of a case study with us that kind of paints the picture of how you've worked with a client to help them optimize and secure that competitive advantage? Maybe what was the results or KPIs that they achieved from working with you?
Yeah, so we'll talk borderless commerce, right? So we'll talk Section 321. So a number of our customers, I'll pick on one, was about a $400 million retailer. We looked at their business. We identified very quickly, they were interested in the model, and we identified very quickly a way to put, approximately $6 million back on the bottom line.
Wow.
And
6 million?
so when you look at those dollars of quantifiable money, that is an absolute competitive advantage in the world of retail, because in the world of retail, we're all competing. It's very slim margins. And we went back to them and we said, this is the model. And they said, is that money real? And we said, yes, it's real. And so fast forward, we engaged our third party partners to validate the process,
Mm-hmm.
right? To validate, okay, this is really what because the client, although they wanted to believe us, they wanted a customs broker to
Mm-hmm.
believe us, but
Okay.
to validate the process. So
Mm-hmm.
the broker had validated the process, and then they're like, wow, like this is real money. I'm like, yeah, it's real money. So that was a very competitive thing, because that $6 million to them, it could open up retail stores, it could add to marketing, you could expand internationally. So that was a pretty interesting case study that I would say gave our customer a big advantage. And handing people that much money is pretty rewarding for us, because we're not competing. You once were in the distribution business.
Mm-hmm.
You're not competing for 10 cents on the inbound and 5 cents on the outbound. And nobody's really too interested in that, because there's this bigger number over here that is more value to them.
Well, especially as capital is costing so much more currently, anywhere that you can find those bottom line savings or putting money back into the business is huge right now. And so, I mean, $6 million, like that's a lot back on the bottom line. Like you said, they could use it for all sorts of things.
Right, right. I mean, when you give money in that number back to somebody,
Hmm.
it is it's a game changer. It could be the difference between them having significant financial trouble or having these dollars to continue.
Right. So true. It's so
Yeah.
true. So let's talk about choosing the right partners, right? Because you can't create that competitive advantage alone. You need the right partners, you need the right suppliers, you need a network. How do organizations choose those right partners? Like, are there certain questions that they should be asking? Or maybe what should the process look like, right? Like, what does it look like to work with your organization at SCI?
Yeah, so I think the Section 321 gets tossed around a lot.
Hmm.
And I think the question is, why would people want to work with us? As I said, you go onto every website and it's Section 321, Section 321. We've been at this for about 6 odd years, and we've learned, I would say, the hard way, and we've learned our lessons as we went through this. As well, I talked about before, our foundation is ecom.
Hmm.
But we learned very quickly to gather partners, whether it's a transportation partner, whether it's a broker, whether it's a freight forwarder. So we've gathered, I would say 10 odd partners to build this model. And we don't use all of them for every customer, but our advantage is we're staying true to what we believe in, which is our foundational business.
Hmm.
And then we let our partners do the rest
Right.
because our focus is warehouse and transportation. If it's customs, we've got a couple of partners. If it's freight forwarding, we've got a couple of partners. If it's somebody to do your duty deferral and duty drawbacks, we got partners for that as well. So our competitive advantage, we're not trying to be everything to everyone. But today, 6 years later, we are shipping thousands and thousands of parcels every day, not only into the United States, but to the rest of the world. And we think we are the market leader just based on volume.
Hmm.
And we're very careful when we go through the process to make sure we follow the steps to make sure our customers don't get themselves into trouble with CBSA
Yeah.
and the processes that the government must follow to get set up in Canada.
Yeah, and I think there are other advantages that we haven't really spoken about today in the fact that moving some of your product into Canada versus going into the US, and there's a lot to that process. There's a lot to consider. There's a lot to talk about. So, what would you say to a retailer or maybe an organization of how they could get started with Section 321? I mean, obviously call SEI.
Yeah, call us.
But what would be some of the first steps to really figure out whether it's right for them or not?
Yeah, I think the first one would be, where's the product being manufactured today? What markets are they in? What's the commodity? What's their duty charges? Like the basics, right? And
Hmm.
and and what are they trying to strive to be? It's easy for a brand to say, "Oh yeah, we want to grow 50%." But is it achievable? And then you start to look at, okay, what's the value of the opportunity? And then what would you do with that money to invest to continue to grow? So I look at the size of the brand, what they're selling. Like if you're selling pianos, it's probably not the right thing for 321 because you might save a couple of bucks on the duties, but you're going to spend a whole bunch of money on transportation.
Hmm.
So looking at the commodities back to those six that we talked about, and then looking at the opportunity, and then, you know, pick up the phone, validate that a bit with your customs broker, and then engage,
Hmm.
SCI or maybe your current 3PL. But that's the way I would go
But make
about it.
sure they know what they're doing with Section 321 because you
You
can't
know
mess
what?
around with that.
Here's what I say. I always say this to customers that, you got to follow the process.
Hmm.
And if you don't follow the process, you're going to get yourself into trouble.
Right.
So we believe we have the process down pat with some of the largest retailers that we all, could wear their clothing, could use their luggage. We do that today with all of them.
Hmm.
And we have testimonials. Our customers are happy. And, we've went as far as, a couple of our transportation partners are very engaged with CBSA in the event that there's an issue.
Well, I
So
think the other question to ask too is how much money am I leaving on the table? I mean, going back to your example, right? How much money am I leaving on the table? And you might not even know. So I would highly recommend and suggest that you look into this ASAP. Now, I've got to ask you one last question because I want to look into the future of your organization. So what's
yeah,
next? I know growth is key, but what
yeah.
can we expect over the next couple of years?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple things. I think the supply chain, to your first question, is going to continue to change. It's going to continue to evolve, and brands are going to need to be always thinking, and retailers thinking about how they get better, how they get money out of the supply chain. It's a big cost. We at SCI, we are now part of Metro Supply Chain Group, and why that's important to as our growth trajectory. We have understanding the duties and tax laws. There are certain retail channels, i.e., wholesale, that you need a US distribution center. So through that acquisition, we now have a number of different warehouses in the US, as
Good.
well as we have a presence in the UK, et cetera. So for us, we're pretty excited about the model, and we're pretty excited about what's going on. 321 is alive and well, and we don't see an end to it. Possibly in 7 years when the USMCA customer agreement gets renegotiated, but time will tell.
Absolutely. And congratulations on the acquisition. And I can't wait to see what that means for your customers. So, for over 30 years, SCI has been making its clients' businesses even better by expertly planning and managing their supply chain logistics requirements. Through continuous improvement processes, business intelligent tools, data driven insights, and progressive technology, SCI's team of experts are committed to reducing costs, risk, and complexity within the supply chain. And by optimizing operations, their clients gain the competitive advantage they need to scale their business. If you want to find out more, you can check them out at sci.ca. And did you have a guess at today's big question? Well, at the top of the show, I asked you, today's guest plans and manages supply chain and logistics requirements for their clients. But how much inventory do they manage every single day? Well, SCI manages over $1 billion in inventory every day for retail, technology, and healthcare customers, which is huge. Dwayne, thank you so much for coming on the show and for the team at SCI for making this episode happen.